We saw in the previous video that isoflavones is one of the top 5 anti-inflammatory food components according to the Dietary Inflammatory Index. Isoflavones might sound unfamiliar, but it is simply a nutrient that is found primarily in soybeans and by extension, soy foods. In this video, we'll take a look at how natural soy foods could reduce chronic inflammation and the risk of chronic diseases, why natural soy foods are more beneficial, and how you could obtain recommended amounts in your diet. Hi, I'm Chung, an accredited nutritionist with a Master's in Nutritional Sciences, here to share with you the latest evidence-based findings on healthy eating and living. We have discussed chronic inflammation and a few of its causes in the previous video that I'll link to in the description. But just as a quick recap, chronic inflammation is a condition where our bodies remain in a state of long-term low-grade inflammation due to a variety of reasons such as environmental toxins, obesity, and poor nutrition. Chronic inflammation could be a cause for daily nuisances such as increased joint pain, digestive issues, and skin problems, but more seriously, chronic inflammation has been linked as a contributing factor to various chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease and cancer. There are various biomarkers that could be used to assess levels of chronic inflammation, with C-reactive protein or CRP being one of the most commonly used. So, what does the research say about soy foods and inflammation? This meta-analysis of 24 randomized controlled trials showed that soy supplementation could reduce CRP by 0.11 mg per liter, or about 4% from baseline. But most interestingly, the meta-analysis also showed that when the analysis was performed on studies that used only natural soy foods, such as soybeans, tofu, and soy milk, CRP was even more significantly reduced by 0.23 mg per liter, or about 9% from baseline. An increase in chronic inflammation has been associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, so could soy intake also mitigate this risk? This meta-analysis analyzed data from 17 studies and found that highest versus lowest amounts of soy intake was associated with a 17% lower risk of developing or dying from a cardiovascular disease. But of particular interest is when the analysis was performed on only studies from Asia, including China and Japan, highest versus lowest intake of soy was associated with a 23% lower risk of developing or dying from a heart attack or stroke. So, what we are seeing so far from these studies is that compared to processed soy products and isoflavone supplements, natural soy foods seem to have a greater impact on lowering chronic inflammation, and the protective effect of soy seemed to be greater in Asian countries. Why is this the case? I'll break that down in a little bit, but before I do that, if you've learned something in this video, help me hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons and turn on the notifications. And if you've not already done so, you could also check out this other video where I dive into another food component that is great for reducing chronic inflammation. Why do natural soy foods seem to have a larger effect on positive health outcomes compared to processed soy products and isoflavone supplements? This probably has to do with the fact that natural soy foods have an intact and complete food matrix. What that means is that soybeans, which is the most natural state of soy foods, would contain not only the isoflavones but also lots of dietary fiber, healthy polyunsaturated fats, vitamins, minerals, and other phytonutrients. When we make tofu and soy milk, we would have removed most of the fiber, but most of the other nutrients would still be present. As we continue to process the pulp removed from the soy milk into soy protein, most of the healthy fats would then also be removed. And when we make an isoflavone supplement, essentially everything else except the isoflavone molecules would now be gone. Research has shown that nutrients such as isoflavones tend to be better absorbed when it comes in its natural food matrix, and also tend to exert a stronger biological effect because the isoflavones work hand in hand or synergistically with other nutrients present in the food matrix. For example, this interesting study looked at the absorption of isoflavones after consuming soy foods containing about 96 mg of isoflavones compared to taking 144 mg of isoflavone tablets. Even though the supplements contain more isoflavones, the maximum blood levels of isoflavones measured in participants were on average 51.4% higher after consuming soy foods compared to taking the supplements. So, what kind of soy foods should we eat and how much should we consume? Let's start with the second question. The first thing to note is that studies done on Western populations are actually dealing with very small amounts of soy foods, even when they are comparing higher to lower intakes. Average intake of isoflavones in Western countries is less than 1 mg per day, with even the highest intakes used in studies usually still less than 5 mg per day. That's equivalent to a small 20-gram piece of tofu. On the other hand, Asian populations consume a lot more soy foods. Average intake of isoflavones in Hong Kong and Singapore could range from 10 to 20 mg per day, while in Japan and parts of China, average intake could range from 25 to 50 mg per day. That is up to 10 times more than the highest amounts consumed in Western countries. A couple of meta-analyses done on Asian populations could also be used as references on further answering this question. This nationwide prospective study from China with close to 100,000 participants showed that highest intake of soy, which was equivalent to more than 20 mg per day of isoflavones, compared to less than the median intake, equivalent to less than 5 mg per day of isoflavones, was associated with a 14% lower risk of developing or dying from a cardiovascular disease and a 17% lower risk of dying from all causes. In this other meta-analysis, 8 studies, mainly from Asia, with about 600,000 women were analysed, and the researchers found that every 10 mg per day increase in isoflavone intake through soy foods was associated with a 3% lower risk of having breast cancer. This relationship extended all the way up to an intake of 70 mg per day of isoflavones, which means that consuming 50 mg per day of isoflavones through soy foods could be associated with a 15% lower risk of having breast cancer. Putting all of this together and using the average intake of China and Japan as a reference, a minimum of 25 mg per day of isoflavones would probably be a good place to start. So, what will you need to eat to get 25 mg per day of isoflavones? Before I go into that detail, if you've not already done so, help me hit the like and subscribe buttons and turn on the notifications. And if you enjoyed this video, help me share it with just one other person. Which natural soy foods do we need to eat in a day to get 25 mg of isoflavones? Start off your day with 1 cup or about 250 ml of soy milk as a drink on its own, or use it to soak your overnight oats, and that will give you 25 mg of isoflavones before you leave the house. For lunch, throw in 100 grams of regular tofu into a stir fry, or order a serving of tofu with your economy rice, and that will give you another 25 mg of isoflavones. What does 100 grams of tofu look like? It will be about 1/3 of a standard pack of tofu that you normally find in the supermarket. And for dinner, air fry 50 grams of tempeh or stir fry 50 grams of frozen edamame with mushrooms or other vegetables, and that will give you another 25 mg of isoflavones. Did you know that edamame is one of the most unprocessed forms of soybeans, while the fermentation process to make tempeh actually increases the bioavailability of isoflavones? If you'd like to find out the isoflavone content of a certain soy food, drop a comment below and I'll reply with any information that I have. As you can see, we can readily get 25 to 75 mg of isoflavones with these easily available natural soy foods. And one more additional tip. The firmer the tofu, the higher will be the isoflavone and incidentally, the protein content. So 70 grams of pressed tofu or tau kwa actually has the same 25 mg of isoflavones as 140 grams of silken tofu. I'm Chong from Nutrition Domus, and if you are keen to find out more about one-to-one functional nutrition counseling, where I help clients build sustainable habits for a longer health span, do head over to my website, nutritiondomus.com, and sign up for a free strategy session. In these other videos, I'll explain what is chronic inflammation, as well as do similar deep dives into some of the other anti-inflammatory food components from the Dietary Inflammatory Index. Check them out now, and I'll see you next time.